This is the Sandman on TV podcast industries. We're discussing the Sandman Chapter 6, The Sound of Her Wings.
You could have called me, you know.
I didn't want to worry you.
Oh, I don't believe it. Let me tell you something, Dring. And I'm only going to say this once, so you better pay attention. You are utterly the stupidest, most self-centered, pathetic excuse for an anthropomorphic personification on this or any other plane. Feeling sorry for yourself because your little game is over and you haven't got the balls to go out and find a new one.
Welcome back, fellow dreamers. This is TV Podcast Industries. We are talking about the Sandman Chapter 6, The Sound of Her Wings. I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
Hello there, fellow dreamers. I'm one of your other hosts, John.
And I am the other anthropomorphic personification of a podcast host, Chris.
Well done, Chris. I used that anthropomorphic personification quote because I didn't think any of us would remember it. So that's the quote we've used for our opening of this episode. But I was wrong. Well done, Chris.
Thank you.
Well, no, he just heard it.
He just heard it. Yes. Well, he took his notes well. I'll give him credit for that.
Both.
Yes, we meet another anthropomorphic personification in this episode, probably the most famous and most beloved of the Sandman universe. We finally get to meet another one of the Endless.
Yes, officially. Mm-hmm. We have seen people in the background. We've seen a certain blonde-haired person.
We can say it. We've seen Desire.
Well, we've seen Desire. Yeah. We have seen Desire.
We said it. We did mention it.
Yes.
Yeah. Desire is there.
But Desire is still, right now, a character that we don't know much about. Death, we learn a lot about in this episode. We hope you've enjoyed watching these episodes along with us, fellow dreamers. We did mention last week, don't hold out if you're watching the episodes while we're recording the podcast. Watch all the series all the way through to the end, because we're in that window that Netflix is deciding whether they're going to renew for season 2 or not. So the more people that watch the entire season, the more chance that's going to happen. So unlike other shows where we tell you to wait along with us, this one, go watch ahead. It's well worth watching. We'll still be here when you get finished, or you're going through in your second rewatch. Yeah,
and a few things have already hit the chopping block. Resident Evil, the latest TV show, has been officially cancelled after one season.
That's right.
Because again, apparently the numbers weren't there.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but because we heard it was a top trending show when it launched, and it was given middling to, it's Strong's C's of 6s and 7s and 8s. It was kind of everything from okay to good on a lot of the reviews.
But just the numbers weren't there. Just like Lock and Key getting cancelled after it had filmed its 4th season, which is now its final season. Umbrella Academy's been confirmed to get an extension for one final season as well, so that'll be going away. We have Stranger Things coming back for one final season as well. We'd love to have some great content on Netflix like Sandman, and there's loads more stories to tell when they do get a season 2, so that'd be great if you keep watching it.
Yes.
And make sure, as you're watching through the episodes, to send us in your feedback. Email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com, or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/tvpodcastindustries. There's a spoiler post up there for every episode of The Sandman. So you can pop in there and pop in your thoughts, and we'll talk about them on the podcast.
Indeed. And of course, fellow dreamers, you can subscribe to any nightmarish or good dreaming podcast catcher of your choice.
That's right.
You can head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can find a smorgasbord of podcast catchers of your choice.
Absolutely.
Indeed. But let's get into our spoiler-filled discussion of The Sandman Chapter 6. The Sound of Her Wings.
Yes, let's do that. The executive producers for the show are Alan Heinberg and Neil Gaiman, along with David S. Goyer. This episode was written by Lauren Bello. She wrote an episode of Foundation on Apple TV and is a story editor of Sandman, and formerly an assistant to David S. Goyer when he worked on the DC show Krypton.
Interesting. Yeah. So DC chops there aplenty.
Exactly, and may have come over with David S. Goyer when he was doing the original production. I presume that's where she came over from. The director of this episode was Mairzee Almas. We know Mairzee Almas very well because she directed loads of our favourite shows, including Jessica Jones, Why the Last Man, Iron Fist, and recently Shadow and Bone and Paper Girls for Prime Video, which I've heard is quite good as well.
Excellent stuff. Yes, love Shadow and Bone as well.
That was really good.
Yeah, really enjoyed that first season.
And Why the Last Man, another great director of Why the Last Man.
Yeah. Loads of good stuff here. Expecting a lot from this episode then.
Absolutely. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for Sandman Chapter 6, The Sound of Her Wings?
Sure. After recovering his helm, pouch of sand and ruby, Morpheus feels aimless and unmotivated, like there is something missing from his duties. But his big sister, Death, comes to meet him and asks her brother to accompany her as she escorts the deceased to the afterlife. She explains that there was a time in her history that she too felt that she was just going through the motions as the inevitable end for everyone. As she goes about her work, she shows Morpheus the possibility of finding purpose and fulfilment in his duties as ruler of dreaming, as she has since realizing that she is the last connection that all beings have before they leave the world. All they crave is a friendly smile and a kind ear. Morpheus is reminded of a bet he once made with his sister after overhearing a young man called Hob Gadling declare that he will never die, as he believes that life only ends when you give up. In the White Horse Tavern in the year 1389, Death agrees to spur Gadling and grant him his wish for as long as he wants, with the agreement that he will meet Dream at the same spot every 100 years and tell him of his experiences. Each time they meet, Hob Gadling describes his life and maintains that no matter the turns in his life, he still does not wish for death. Through the wonderful or awful centuries, or whether his mysterious meetings with Dream are being investigated by Joanna Constantine, Hob reiterates that his life is his life and he never wants it to end. In 1889, their conversation leads to Hob hypothesizing that Morpheus continues to meet with him because he is lonely and needs a friend, which greatly offends Morpheus. As the next century passes, Morpheus fails to show for their next meeting due to his capture by Burgess. When their age-old drinking hole is sold, Hob chooses a new tavern a block away, hoping that Morpheus will choose to find him. In the present, with his sister's words of encouragement in his ears and craving connection again, Morpheus seeks out Hob Gadling, who joyfully greets his endless drinking companion as the two friends catch up on missed time.
Pretty joyful and hopeful episode, this one. And I think before the show started, or if you haven't watched The Sandman and didn't know the comics and you heard there was an episode about death, you probably wouldn't have thought it would be a pretty joyful episode, right?
Oh, 100%.
I think so. I think it's, it's tinged with the sanctity of life by the fact that people are passing away, and death is there to greet them on that journey to their afterlife. No matter how old or young they are, and no matter what type of relationship they have with gods of different varieties. So it's hopeful, but it's tinged with that sadness and of loss, and you see that, quite brutally throughout it. But in that sense, it is hearing the machinations of death in terms of her job is really, really interesting. And of course, in the end, the connectivity or the connection that Morpheus is seeking, that thing that he feels is missing, also relates in some way to the connectivity that humans have during their life, which makes their life meaningful before they pass away.
Absolutely. Like, it's such a great choice here that this episode is based on two stories from the comic book, The Sound of Her Wings, which was the introduction of death, and it's based on Men of Good Fortune, which was the Hob Gadling story. They're separated by a few issues, not much, very, very, I think it's only one story in between the two issues. But the pairing of the two of them together makes so much logical sense in what's the journey here that we're seeing for Morpheus and what's happening with him as a character. I think it's such a good pairing, to choose that. Agreed.
For me, this has to be, in my opinion, like one of the best narrative-based and dialogue-based hour-long segments on film. Like, just when you were describing human nature, or the human being, or the being of being a human, like the experiences, the actual thoughts, the feelings, the loss, the love, the grief, the remorse, the everything, the revenge and the anger, because that comes in from the dream himself. It's just like some of the lines. God, when you think Death's going for the mother, and she turns left, like, even I, as someone who knew what was going to happen, still wasn't fully prepared for the emotional seesaw that is this episode.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important to mention. You know, this is, I say the character of Death is a standout from the comic books, but this is where people fell in love with the comic. This moment here, because certainly for a lot of us that were interested in this stuff in the early 90s, that were interested in comic books and interested in more adult comic books after getting kind of through the superhero phase, a story like this, which gives you a brand new perspective on death, a brand new perspective on life, for the life that we all live, and it's all going to end with death. There's nobody that escapes, as the line from the comic book says. There's a moment where she sees no one here gets out alive spray painted on the wall, and Death kind of laughs at it and then goes, it also makes me sad to see something like that, you know. This is all of us, but that perspective that Neil Gaiman brings to it in his comic is so perfect that I think from this point onwards, everybody that was reading the book stuck with it right through to the end of the book, because you suddenly realize this writer is doing something really special. There's so many lines in this episode that are taken directly from the comics, directly from page to screen, and acted so beautifully. Just such a great story, and such a great interpretation of it for the TV. I'd go with you, Chris. This is probably the best adaptation I've seen of anything I've ever read before seeing it on screen. I think they've done such a brilliant job. Yeah. Will we get into our top moments then of the episode?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's start off there. Let's start off with Death's tour of humanity. I kind of like how it starts off. It's always an interesting point. This is about a month on from when Morpheus has gotten back all of his tools, and he had this mission. This was the thing that we said at the beginning of the series. Oh, he's set up for his mission. Now this is going to take you 10 episodes, and then you get to episode 5. He's got everything back. And then he could just restore the dreaming to its former glory, and that's kind of the story done. But I love how it starts with this moment where he's just sitting on a bench going, there's something wrong. I've done everything that I needed to do, but how do I get back to being myself again?
Well, it definitely had moping goth children vibes in the park on a summer's day, heavy and black, for sure. I really liked it, actually.
Yeah.
Certainly the pigeon feeding, Lord of Dreams feeding the old flying rats. So I kind of really like this.
Pigeons dream too, Stan?
Well, they certainly do. I guess. I don't know. Yes, they dream about baguettes.
They do. Yes.
Being broken apart and fed to them in the park.
Hell, as a celiac, I do too.
And then we get our introduction. We have Kirby Hell-Baptiste walking over to Dream. Now, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we all probably came into this episode knowing this is Death, right? The comic book version of it. If you're reading it month to month, you would not know until very late in the episode that this is Death. You'd have an idea of who the character is, but you don't even know there's a connection between these two characters to begin with.
Absolutely. That was the big thing for me. I just thought it was a randomer just being chatty next to him in the park, because he's looking down and fed up. So like the reveal for me was just, oh, that's cool, that's excellent. To begin with, I thought she was involved with the gang of lads playing football as well,
with Franklin and the boys.
With Franklin, but she is, but just Franklin doesn't know that she will be involved with him. So I just really liked that. I just loved that notion. And I think, I loved how Death was portrayed here as being almost part of everyone's life. even though ultimately within the viewing, this is death walking into, for example, Harry the violinist's house, but immediately the conversation is struck up with her.
Yeah.
And
I love how instantaneously they all know who she is as well.
Yeah, it's just it's the acknowledgement of the ever presence of death in that sense, in terms of the familiarity of when she arrives.
Yeah.
But the shock, like you see with the little baby in the cot, but the shock of people who are witnessing then the death of that child, the little baby in that case, but even Franklin and his friends as he's knocked down, compared to the person who is going through death at that moment. So I thought it was really, just so well portrayed, actually. I love, in that sense, I really, really enjoyed how it was portrayed.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's so beautiful, even the opening death, really, of Harry, an old man playing a tune that they haven't heard in 200 years, and then he dies, and then looks back at himself going, I look so old. That moment of realization, but wanted to have one final word, and death is so calm with him, allowing him to say his Hebrew prayer, allowing him that moment to guide himself to whatever his afterlife is supposed to be. I love that line from Death where Harry says to her, well, I've made my prayer, now I go to heaven, don't I? And she goes, well, now's the time you find out. So she doesn't usher anybody into the afterlife. She doesn't push anybody towards heaven or hell or wherever they're going. She's there just at their final moment to hold their hand, say a kind word, and usher them to whatever it is that's after.
Yeah, well, she says they have the long and arduous journey to wherever it is that they might be going in the afterlife, which is really good. I think the other side of it is just that, in this sense, death is so chipper. Really, like she's at one with the role, in effect, the job that she's doing, which is really like interesting to see that kind of, that perspective. Yeah. And even just, she's in good spirits, but also then asking her brother to come along as she goes about her work during the day. Yeah. As a way of, trying to deal with Dream's issues where he feels nothing. I mean, he says, I'm more powerful than I have been in eons, and yet there's something missing. Yeah. I'm feeling nothing, despite all of that power. So, she, like a good sister, brings him along to just maybe show some possibilities, expose him to something that she feels he might need.
Well, absolutely.
Which is really good.
If you think your job is hard, Morpheus, look what I've had to do for centuries, and I've accepted it. I also like that she had a little tinge of dark humor with her, with Franklin, where he's basically coming on to her, and she goes, "Don't worry, Franklin, I'll see you soon." That's a little bit of dark humor in there from Death.
Would you actually say gallows humor?
I would definitely say gallows humor, yeah. And, of all the people that we see die in the episode, I do think I'm most like Sam, the American tourist who's on holiday with his wife on their honeymoon. And when he dies, he goes, but I can't die right now. All of our plane tickets are on my phone, and she doesn't have access to it, so she won't be able to get back home, which I feel like would be the first thing that would go through my head. Oh no, I didn't plan for that.
Yeah,
Poor
exactly.
Sam. It's a really sad moment, but again, a little touch of those realistic moments that may go through somebody's head. So I like that.
Yeah, it's the humanity in humanity. It's the realism in humanity, I should say. Before I get into any of that kind of the actual story, I do want to call out Kirby. Just spot on casting here. Just the embodiment of what I read back in the day. Yeah. And it's just the actual ability to bring those words to life, to take something from page and put it in your own spin. I actually didn't think about Death having a British accent, but it makes complete sense when it kind of comes, you're going to, yes, this
I'll see you soon, Chris.
Thank you. It does make sense though. It brings that kind of gravitas to it. And in times of old, in ye olde days, you would have had death being a lord, kind of the Lord Death, that kind of Grim Reaper. And you could have had that.
Yeah.
But you don't, because death, as we talk about in this story, death is there to not scare them, but to shuttle them, to move them and transition them between point A and point B, with this point A being death and point B being the beyond.
Whatever's after, exactly. And I suppose as well, it does make sense with Tom Sturridge as Morpheus, this being his closest sibling. He's British, she's British. It's a British written comic book, but interestingly, this story actually all took place in New York and New Jersey. So all of these deaths in the comic book were all around the US. There was a really good commentary that was done by all the major cast and Neil Gaiman and Alan Heinberg and David Escort last week, where he mentioned, interestingly, the real reason why it's set in London instead of New York was COVID. They didn't fly out of the UK. They couldn't. And he was kind of like, well, actually, two of the people that die are both British who happen to live in New York. So it makes just as much sense to have it in England. And especially when you're pairing the stories together, which is hobgoblin coming from medieval England all the way up to present day. Yeah. It does make loads of sense that they're all taking place around there. So really good. Did you also see the little touch on death from that conversation with Morpheus where she says, I used to feel really empty in my old job. I think that might be a reference to the other version of death being a skeleton. And now she's a fully, full open person. It felt quite empty inside back then because she was a skeleton.
Well, that's it. But it was, I like that kind of little references, and I just love the really subtle, just seeing the shadow of the wing beats as she takes the people who have died away for their long and arduous journey. It's just real nice touch, and I think
I love Morpheus not watching on either. He's never watching to see what happens. He's just kind of turns away as they have their final moment together.
Exactly, and I mean, through this series of deaths, that they go through, I just really liked how she brings it back to, when Dream asks, how do you do this? How are you there for each and every one of them? Mm-hmm. And I really like then that kind of potted history of effectively Death saying, well, I was in a similar position, just going through the motions, feeling nothing really. Yeah. Except in the beginning where it was all shiny and new, because what she says, in the beginning it was fine. Life and death was new. It's like this brand new toy.
Humans approached everything
exactly
with that,
and that thought about giving up. It just got really hard, and she became brittle. But I loved how then to make her role as the Lord of Death, it was realizing that she was there to serve humans in this moment, and that the purpose, their purpose as lords of different realms, is the function of doing what they're doing.
Exactly.
Which for the case of Death is to take them to the begin them on their journey to the afterlife, and for people to dream, and that, ultimately they just need a friendly face, a kind word, like they had in the beginning when they were born, sort of at, with their parents and so on, that moment of joy at birth. Mm-hmm. They need that moment of empathy and caring in their final moment. So
to be there with someone that they know loves them. Yeah.
So I just really like that. And of course, the inevitable thing, whilst it was brand new and shiny at the start, ultimately I get, this was my favorite line from Death was, people may not be ready for my gift, but they get it anyway.
Yeah.
And so, that kind of the fatalism of it is all very powerful and correct, that happens. And I just really liked how this all intermingled through as they toured, in a sense, or went round Death's to-do list, effectively.
Yeah,
It's like my singing.
No, that is not inevitable.
They're not ready for the gift. It's inevitable. It will come.
It is a little fatalistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some gaffer tape can sort that out.
Just straight over the blade. And then I actually will meet death.
No, just put it over your mouth, not your mouth and your nose.
Yeah, you'll still be able to breathe.
You'll be able to breathe, Chris.
Okay.
But you just have to breathe through your nose. Yeah.
Okay.
There is a great line from the comic book that's misattributed to this particular issue, but it's from Death in a later issue where she basically says everybody gets one life, and that's it. No matter how long or short it is, that's one life. In this episode, one of the things that it wouldn't have worked in live action, but the baby does actually say something. It does say the words, "Is that it?" To Death, and Death says, "Yes, that's it. That's all you get." And effectively, no matter when somebody is dying, whether it's Harry in his final years in his old age, or whether it's the baby who passes, effectively Death has to deal with all of those as that's all the time you got. It could have been. It can't be any longer for you. This is your time. So I'm kind of, I was really interested that they added a few extra kind of moments. The kid who gets stabbed in the street and dies, the girl who dies of a heroin overdose and, in a tent under a bridge, dying alone. It kind of throws that concept you hear so many times from people of you're born alone, you die alone, and then the rest of your life is what matters. That's the concept that's being challenged by Gaiman's writing. He's saying you're never alone. In your time, you have a moment when you're born, you're with your family. When you die, somebody's there to hold your hand and usher you on to the next place, effectively. So, a really lovely sentiment. It takes away that loneliness that's always there from that quote. And I feel like that's probably the point he started from. You're born alone, die alone. And that sounds so negative. Whereas I love this twist on it. I love this concept.
Definitely.
Anything else about Death's story within the episode, Chris? Anything else you want to add?
No. It made me emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's very few. I'm a cynic when it comes to some of the more forced emotional aspects of TV shows, where they're trying their damned hardest through writing, through show direction, through whatever, to elicit that response.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes across, in a lot of shows, in my opinion, as kind of that more forced and sometimes cringy.
Yeah.
None of this came across as that way, in that it was that, like, when you feel an emotion coming through, when you feel something that is just, and it's sadness to a degree. It's you're getting an emotional because you see a baby basically pass on. You see an old man who asked, "Is this it?" And it was, yes, everyone gets one. Everyone gets that one final.
Yeah, I mean, even Sam is on his honeymoon as well.
Yes.
Can I just get 5 more minutes to tell my wife where the tickets are for our flight back to America? Just 5 more minutes before you take me away. And again, it's not death that's causing it. It's not death that's taking them. It's death that's there with them when they die.
I mean, even Franklin, the adage of, there's a guy there in the prime of his life. Mm-hmm. He's young, healthy, he's looking for love.
Yeah.
And it's being knocked over by a car in the street.
Ways before you cross the street.
All of it, and it all resonates because of the tragedy around it. Mm-hmm. And it's having, in a sense, that contrast to ultimately the inescapable, as Death says, they're going to get my gift anyway.
Exactly.
At some point, at some time, it's that, but also, as you say, the kindness that is being brought here by Death in that final moment, that they who are dying are accepting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. I think I could talk about this bit of the episode all day. There's still probably other things that we could talk about, but let's move on to the other storyline. Let's move on to, effectively Morpheus's next mission, to recover the bit that he's forgotten about, the bit that he's lost about, because we are taken back to a better a gamble, I guess you'd probably say, between Death and Dream, who go back to a bar in 1389, and already Death is saying to Dream that he's feeling disconnected from humans. He needs to spend time in their company and see who they are as people so that he can get to know them better. She's already starting off that conversation with him right back in this moment where she's bringing him to meet some humans, stand in a pub, have a drink, have a listen to the conversations, see what they're really like, so you're not just seeing them in the dream world, effectively. I like that little connection to the other story. It's exactly the same as a comic book. It's not new, but I like that connection between the two storylines.
Yeah. I love this whole thread, actually, with Hob Gadling, or aka Robert Gadling. AKA Sir Robert Gadling.
Yes.
I really enjoyed it. I loved the actor who played Hob, actually.
Yeah, he was really good, wasn't he?
It was just the whole sentiment of it, and it was just how, even in quite a short space of time, there was that connection built between Hob and Death, to the point where then, even though Dream had literally given him nothing about who he was, it was still that 100-year appointment and chat and conversation that they had. And, that moment where in 1889, where Hob is trying to just probe about Death, and he says, I think you're lonely, you're seeking friendship, and that is an affront to Dream here.
Absolutely.
I was like, and then missing the appointment because he's actually being locked up in the basement of the Burgess family home, and seeing Hob in 89 where Dream doesn't turn up. And I was like, he's because Hob is missing him. Hob is making the friendship that Dream still hasn't entirely taken on what his sister was asking of him to get to know them.
Yes.
Because there's those frank conversations. Well, do you want to be my friend? Because I've been coming since 1389, for these meetings. And I love that. And I loved his story that he was both successful and had it all stripped away. I really liked just seeing all of that. I loved her as well when Dream and Death are actually moving through the White Horse Tavern there in 1389. They're talking about revolution and so on. There's the poll tax coming in from the kings.
Yeah, it's the king's second increase in the poll tax.
Exactly. Yeah. And then in 1789, you get this repeat of the revolution with the America, with North America, the colonies, and in France.
Yeah.
And then they say it's because the French lords didn't play cricket or something with their with their staff like the lords in England do. I'd say that's nonsense, but anyway. But even then in 89, where there's all talk of Thatcher's poll tax, so it's just I loved how it kind of gave this cycle of history effectively.
Yeah.
I thought it was really sort of well done in the way it was done. I loved the different settings and dressings for the White Horse Tavern, for Dream as well. Whereas certainly when he was looking a bit like Jack the Ripper there in 1889, I thought that was a cool look. And of course, Lushing Lou, aka the hospital, in the either she's in them or she sends men to them, which I thought was absolutely priceless.
Very good.
Loved it. So I really enjoyed this sequence.
Absolutely.
Between Dream and Hob Gadling. I thought it was just really, really well done.
Absolutely. I like that gag of the background conversations because there's nothing certain in life except death and taxes, right? So throughout every century, they're still talking about the taxes. Aren't they terrible? So really good stuff. What do you think, Chris?
I love this on all accounts, on everything about it, because it is just that it's a fun tweak on friendship. Yeah. We all have that friend who we don't see forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you meet them again and you slip into, you're just like, how are you? Like, what's crack? Like you, it's a play on that, but like, rather than seeing a person every couple of months, you're meeting this person once every 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you're finding out about them. And the odd time you'll fall out, but you're still friends. So you'll see each other the next time and you're still back to being friends. And it's that ending for me is the best part of it, because he's like, all right, you're going to grab a point. Come on, sit down.
Yeah.
It's essentially that, which is like, okay, tell me what has happened, why you missed our appointment. Like, let's move on.
But also Morpheus fully accepting that Hob Gadlin is his friend and has some additional value to him. You know, it almost started out with this kind of gamble really between dream and death, where Hob was challenging her entire nature. He was saying, everybody dies because they're stupid, because they don't want to live. I won't die because I will it. And Death's going, you know what would be fun? If he stays alive. Do you want to do that, Morpheus? Do you want to go and check in with him and see what his life is like every 100 years? I kind of like that, you know. But Morpheus doesn't give anything of himself until, I think it's about 1789 or 1889, somewhere around there. He doesn't really give any information out about himself.
No.
And it's only then that it starts to feel reciprocal between the two of them, and it starts to feel like there is a friendship between the two of them. But that moment of acceptance from Morpheus, that moment when he realizes he's not standing alone in his ivory tower or his dream castle, he needs to have that connection with humans, and he already has one. He already has one that he has had a connection with for hundreds of years.
Yeah, well, that's as he says to Death, he goes, I'm late for an appointment. Thank you, sister, you've reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Because they parted on maybe poor terms, and then he was locked away. So, and it's that realization of that time together. Yeah. And also then being in the company of his sister earlier on, which I agree with Chris. It's just like that ending in the present at the new inn where they, you know, finally, there's the I owe you an apology. Dream apologizes to him. It's not good to keep your friends waiting, you know, and you get that, acknowledgement that Hob Gadling has become a friend of the Lord of Dreams. So it's really good. And I think everything in between is just really amazing sort of layering and fantastically concise, like, storytelling. Well, like, in terms of the comedy, like, I love just the jump from 1389 to the next 100 years where, you know, he goes, life is effing brilliant. They've introduced chimneys, so you're not crying from the smoke in the pub, you know, or handkerchiefs and playing cards and stuff like this. You know, and he's started in a new trade, printing, which he thinks will never really get off the ground. You know, so I love that. And then I really liked, you know, that darker moment with the meeting in 1789 about, you know, he's gone into the shipping business. There's this new form where effectively, it's bringing the goods from Britain to its colonies and bringing slaves back effectively, or moving slaves on to another place. And you get that moment where Dream is, you should choose a different path.
Yes.
But he says, you can still choose whether to stay in it or not, but you shouldn't expect to take away that right to choose to other people. Exactly. I just thought it was really good. Yeah. You know, it was absolutely perfectly said. Yeah. The wrongs about it. Yeah. You know, because Hob pushes back, so I thought you said I could choose what I did. And then I think just that experience that Hob has, you know, through, you know, dubious decisions, but also the great times where he's been made a sir, he has a family, it's good food, it's good wine, to where he's lost it all. And he's hated the last 80 years. You know, he says, but I still want to live. Yeah. It's better. There's still life to live. Exactly. And I I don't want death, and I'm not going to die.
It's better than being in the ground, being eaten by maggots, right? No matter what it is, that's his attitude all the way throughout, And I loved how Tom Sturridge played that conversation when Hobgadling was riding really high and he'd filled up an entire table full of food and all the best food. He's getting more and more stuff delivered to him, and that's the moment that Morpheus has the least interest in him. He turns away and talks to somebody else in the bar. He turns away and finds Will Shakespeare, somebody that interests him, somebody he finds intriguing, because Hobgadling thinks him surrounding himself by wealth, becoming a sir, and you'll never guess, but I also had the Queen over to my house, which is so much trouble. And Morpheus just looking at him, kind of going, okay, I'll come back in 100 years and see what your life is like. That's basically, he's not interested in someone that's being as excessive as Hobgadling is in that moment. And I really like that. He'll still come back in 100 years and find out how his life's going, and his life went really bad from that point onwards. But Morpheus is not interested in the kind of talk of excesses that Hobgadling wants to talk about there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those surrounding characters, some of the other people, because again, remember, this is all a book coming from Neil Gaiman. He's interested in the process of writing. There's the joke in there about the printing press. It'll never take off, written by a writer, of course,
Yeah.
We have a number of people appearing throughout this episode. We have William Shakespeare. We have Geoffrey Chaucer. We have Marlowe in there, all real writers throughout the centuries, all people that have some contemporaries like Marlowe and Shakespeare, but Dream providing some inspiration potentially for William Shakespeare.
I love that. I thought it was a real Neil Gaiman thing to do, just having Will Shakespeare, who is, by all accounts, certainly from Hob, is crap. But he is the conversation that old Shakespeare is looking to give, which is, I want people to think about this, have this in their memories, across time, like dreams.
And inspire their dreams.
And this, piques the interest, of Dream. I love that. I loved even that with the Geoffrey Chaucer. He's just being called Geoffrey, but he likes to do rhymes, and the other writer with him is like, no, that's never going to catch on. You shouldn't be rhyming. And he goes, yeah, but I like it. Yeah. And of course, so it's just really, it's a real writer's way of looking at it. The writer's view of history in that sense. And it's just so Neil Gaiman for me, and I love it when he does those types of things.
Yeah. And I love that he's been able to keep them in the show.
Yeah. For me, it was actually even more to say some of the surroundings. So you've got the bartender, which is played by the lovable Ian McNeill.
In 1989, yes.
Yes. Who I just found so... Everyone knows his face, be it from Dune or Doctor Who, or he's that lovable English actor you get for some of those parts.
Yeah.
And just the conversation he has with Hob.
Yeah. It's like a great bartender, isn't it? He doesn't ever ask any details of what Hobb's talking about. He just goes, I've seen many friends who've fallen out. And then you see them coming back together with a reunion over a drink. Sit down and have a chat, basically.
And it was fun. So you have that, and then you have perhaps the biggest reveal of a supporting character, which is Joanna Constantine's great grandmother.
Well, 300 years, so quite a few greats, I'd say.
Yeah,
in there.
great grandmother.
We'll just say her ancestor, Lady Joanna Constantine. Yes.
Which is really fun because you see people looking for, and you see that they are being followed, and there's a painting being done or a drawing being done of them, and it's fun. Yes, if you have someone consistently meeting every 100 years, folklores about the deals with devil and all that starts to grow up. And it's fun just to see the impact of two men meeting every 100 years in the same place.
Yeah. I love that. I must say, I love as you say, that mythology that happens, how folklore, tales, legends, myths, and just that, someone, back in 1689 drew a picture of Dream and the destitute Hob Gadling.
Well,
and
yes.
it's there again, but it's become known as the Tale of the Devil and the Wandering Jew. It's just like, I love that, where they both just turn around and say, well, I'm not the devil. And Hob Gadling is like, I'm not Jewish. It's like, you've got it completely wrong. But it's just really good. And, you know, how then, well, we've got to be careful next time because we could get burnt as witches or something. Well, yes. So it's like, it's just all those little points of just great writing, just concise and in a nutshell that just adds this like layers here. Even having Joanna Constantine, you know, back in, well, her ancestor back in here, just with the reference to earlier in the season, you know, really nicely done. You see why, you know, then 100 years later, it's, well, I've gotten her to do a few jobs for me, and she's done it really well. She's very successful.
Yes,
you know,
which I like, because we heard that from Joanna Constantine in present day, her saying that you've had a connection with my family for many years, but you know we can't always be trusted. So reference to the fact that the first time they met, the first time that family met Dream, she tried to capture him effectively, and they fought him off. But he did come back and use her again, and she was very useful for the job he had for her. So, hopefully, a possibility we'll see Jenna Coleman back in a season 2 or season 3, maybe doing that job back in as Lady Joanna Constantine. We may see that. Loads of stories available to tell, though.
So that's one of my quick notes on this episode, which is this does set up some potential season 2 topics or discussion points, because you do have that there is a further comic book kind of with all about Will, which is discussed, which we could see Will Shakespeare come back again.
We could.
And then there is further Lady Joanna Constantine stories.
Possibilities, yes. Remember, William Shakespeare did write a particular play in the middle of summer about a dream. So entirely possible that A Midsummer Night's Dream could have been inspired by Dream.
Yes.
There you go. I think I may have just spoiled that.
You were being really kind of like quizzical. It's like, this may be, there you go.
I hope the show goes on long enough to show Neil Gaiman's version of Midsummer Night's Dream, because it is a great story.
Yeah,
really, really great story.
That would be fantastic.
I've just got one note to mention, because I liked how it was called out when Death and Dream are talking, and Death is saying that she's there for everybody, no matter who they are. Well, except for Mad Hetty, of course, and your project, which leads into Hob Gadling's story. So Mad Hetty was the character that we saw back in episode 3 who called out to Joanna Constantine and mentioned that she'd been around for a couple of 100 years, basically. So we don't know Mad Hetty's history, but we know that Death has not met with her and may never meet with her. So she may be on the same kind of path as Hob Gadling through the centuries. So, so an interesting little tidbit about Mad Hetty. We'll hopefully get to see her again.
Definitely.
Hopefully. What about you, Sir John? Any notes for yourself?
Just the reference from Dream to his sister. I think it's as they're walking along the river and she gets the apple, and Dream asks any word of the prodigal, which I am guessing is the flighty sibling that also begins with the letter D that we haven't yet come across.
yes, another member of the Endless. That's
but I'm guessing it's the prodigal son, maybe, but it might not be. I don't know.
They call them the prodigal, so no specifics on that at all. It is literally just the member of the Endless. Definitely beginning with a D, because they all are. That we will find out, hopefully, at a later date who that is.
And she also, as well, in that same conversation, says that Desire was in pretty good spirits whilst he was locked away, but she does feel that Desire may have missed her sparring partner as well. So I guess it's that You can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family type of situation.
Absolutely. And that's, again, another relationship we may see more of in the future. We do see Desire calling on another member of the Endless, sitting in their atrium, calling on another member of the Endless, which we don't know who that is just yet.
Oh, yes, large person in the clouds with a big heart. I really liked that.
Yes. Yeah,
I really enjoyed that.
It's a beautiful version from the
visually
comics. Yeah,
amazing,
really, absolutely stunning. Yeah.
And I don't know quite what it means. I guess Heart's Desire, maybe. So that's why the heart is so mahusive, along with the person in the clouds.
Yes, very good, John. That's
and
exactly
maybe why
where
the
Desire
person's
sits.
in the clouds as well, because the head's in the cloud. Thinking of what it is they would
Whatever
like
they
to
desire.
do.
Yes. We'll definitely find out more about that Desire to come later on in the season. Any other notes? Any other thoughts before we get on to closing out the episode?
Nothing for me. I just want to see episode 7.
Yes,
Very
nothing from me either. Just those little minor notes.
Excellent. Well then, overall, John, what did you think of the episode? What did you think of Sandman Chapter 6, The Sound of Her Wings?
I really enjoyed this. I'd give it 5 boozers through the ages out of 5. I just loved everything from start to finish. I think it was, first of all, getting to see Dream's sister Death. I think the poignancy that they brought there, but the hopefulness with that, just the rationalization of what Death does and how that's being translated by Neil Gaiman. I think really something different, something special. And I think each of these, whether it was Harry the violinist, Sam the swimmer, Franklin the footy player, all the little baby, Lovely, just really those different elements of the point that the gift is ready to be given, at any point, at any time. And I think, just how that links to Death as his sister, looking to show him the possibilities of, fulfilment as the Lord of Dreams, and coming then that linking to the earlier attempt by her to say, you need to sit with the people who she says, we're here to serve in the same way he is as Lord of Dreams is there to serve humans in that dreamscape and world. And then that relationship with Hobgadling, I think as Chris said, it's just that amazingly Gaiman-esque type take on long-standing but not necessarily frequent friends, where you just get back into a room and it all picks off and starts up again as though you haven't had 100 years in between or haven't seen one another in, that time. So it's just really, really good. And I mean, all the different elements in between this, the humor, just the little touches with Will Shaxbird, with Joanna Constantine, with Lushing Lou, just really nice bits, all just made this such a rich and dense episode that was just really good for me. So absolutely loved it. 5 boozers through the ages out of 5.
Excellent. Actually, Lushing Lou, also a real person from 1889.
Yeah, well.
Which I love. I love that that's also a reference to a real person. Her stories are available. You can find them. So,
well, that's why I loved how she said, "Oh, I thought you were the Jack the Ripper there," because she would have been in the profession where she was most at risk.
Absolutely. And
I love the nickname as well, the hospital. Just so good.
It's good. It's a good one. Chris, how about yourself? What did you think of the episode overall?
Loved it. This is for me some of the best writing that came to screen or has been put to film or screen or digitalized or whatever way you want to say it in the last while. Mostly just because of the Death story. Death's that story alone is poignant, deep, but also has elements of humor, like we talked about, like the gallow humor aspect to it as well. And just some of the nicest sentiments and some of the nicest lines and narrative. And I told you, like, I got emotional from parts of it.
Absolutely.
Didn't shed a tear. Haven't got me on that one yet.
No,
but they're getting close. They're going to try. I think the following aspect then is talking about friendship and the wholeness and what can be learned from friendship. So just when you combine death and friendship and bring those two stories together and tell them in such a way that is just fantastical, I suppose, but also so grounded.
Yeah.
The story is grounded, but the elements of that story are fantastical. So therefore you get the desired, you get the endless, having a discussion about life. You get 100-year-old, multi-100-year-old man, and one of the endless discussing life, and then it being a stealth discussion on friendship. Just beautiful.
Absolutely.
So some of the best ever. But what about yourself, Derek? I knew this was a big one for you.
It certainly was. We'd mentioned at the beginning of the season that Netflix did send us the previews of these episodes. I watched the first 2 episodes, and once I was comfortable that they kind of got the concept of Sandman, I jumped straight to episode 6. This was the story that certainly made me a Sandman fan. It made me a Neil Gaiman fan. From that point onwards, I bought every book. I bought his collections of short stories. Pretty much everything that he's written, I've bought. And I think it all hinges on this book. I lost my brother when I was very young. I lost my brother when I was about 10 years old. And this book came out a couple of years after that. And this story really made sense of it for me. I know that's a weird thing to say, but it's sometimes something happens in your life that you can't make sense of. And this was so exactly what I needed to hear at the time I needed to hear it. And seeing it now, 30 odd years later, 32 years later, it had the same effect on me when I watched that opening of the episode, that moment when Death and Morpheus are in the park and meet for the first time. I did shed a tear. A tear of joy. I was like, wow, they've nailed this character. They've nailed Death exactly the way I wanted to see her portrayed on screen. And then I shed a tear as each of the characters died, as the deaths, or as Death was ushering them into the next phase, afterlife. I thought it was so beautifully written. The music was fantastic in the scene when Harry when Harry goes. I thought that was absolutely beautiful, really emotional. But just the matter of factness of Death dealing with it, and as I say, how hopeful Death is about what service she's providing to everybody that passes on, because it will all be there someday. I think it was so well done. I'm so glad a new generation who may never have read the comic books are going to see it presented in this way and hopefully become as big fans of Neil Gaiman's writing and of hopefully the show and of the character as I became back in the 90s. So absolutely loved this. This is top tier television, one of the best things I've seen on TV or in cinema for years.
Definitely.
Absolutely loved it. And it's such a simply done story. You know, they could have run down to the BBC costume department, got all the costumes for Hobgoblin and just switched them out for every episode. There's no big moment in this episode that cost them a million to do. There are moments here that you could absolutely tell the stage play of Death meeting Dream. You could absolutely do a stage play of Death meeting Hobgoblin over the years. Yeah. Still beautifully presented. I don't want to take that away, but it's not a big CGI fest trying to explain big concepts. It is all about the characters on screen and what they bring. Absolutely loved it. This is a 6 out of 5 or an 11 out of 10, like the series is.
Oh, I like what you did there.
11 episodes of a 10 episode series. So we lied last week when we said episode 5 was the midpoint of the series. This is the midpoint. There's 11 episodes. Episode 6 is the midpoint of the series.
Well, halfway through this episode is the
perfect midpoint of the series. Absolutely loved it. Let's hear what our fellow dreamers have to say about this episode. Let's head on over to feedback. If you want to send your thoughts to us, your feedback about any of the episodes, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com or pop on over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TVPodcastIndustries. Facebook.com/TV Podcast Industries. You can also send us any other thoughts through our socials as well. You find us, just search for TV Podcast Industries. First up, Robert Williams sent an email to us at feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. He says, as always, so good to talk to you guys again. Awesome job you're doing with this show. This episode was a real gut wrench. I have an 18-month at home who I seem to love more and more every day. Not sure if any of you guys have kids, but it's hard to explain. As a newish father watching death, I'm assuming this is death, right? Take the newborn almost made me lose it. Expertly shot scene that really poured in the emotion I think I was supposed to be feeling. Interested to hear your viewpoints on these death scenes. Take care, fellas. Robert.
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, we've kind of discussed pretty much all of those death scenes, but they're poignant and they are designed in that way to elicit that feeling, but they're not gory or horror filled or because you could have done that. You could have showed when the poor man drowned to death. You could have shown each of their death scenes.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
You could have shown that, and it would have kind of skyrocketed the show to an R rating. But you could have shown all of that. You could have shown the poor old boy getting knocked by the car. Yeah. But you don't need it. It's not about that death. It's about the journey beyond the next step in their life or their afterlife.
And I think, I must say, I think it's a really interesting take or, decision. I guess this may go back to the actual comics to have, in a sense, having Harry the violinist, or an accident such as Sam swimming, or even with Franklin, they're kind of obvious to some extent. But I think the newborn baby is really kind of bold to do, and actually, there's a reality there that a lot of people don't find easy to speak about if they've lost a newborn. Whether that's after their birth or even say with miscarriages and so on, because of that, just because of that situation. Yeah. So I think it's a really, bold, interesting, but I think important element to show that. Absolutely. Because as well, there's plenty, of tragic, deaths, outside of even our immediate situation of living in Western Europe. If you think of children in other countries where life is more on a tenterhook than here. So, I thought it was really interesting, and bold to do. Yeah. So thanks, Robert.
Yeah. And none of us have kids, Robert, just to say that, but I know these are certainly going to connect with people in different ways. It's quite easy to see someone at the end of their life like Harry and still connect and still realize that's him. That's the end of his time here. But I think even that moment, as I mentioned, the additional ones they put in there, even that moment of the woman dying alone of an overdose, or the kid who looks like he's either had a gunshot or most likely being that it's in the UK, a stab wound that's killed him in the back alley all on his own. I think they're all affecting in their own way. They're all representative of the kind of things death is coming up against in her experience and her job. So I think they're all really, really well told. And I do think, as you say, John, a really important one to put in there because people don't talk about it very often. And it's a hugely affecting thing.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Robert. Good to hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much, Robert. Next up, we have an email from Coffee and Vodka about episode 6. Greetings, fellow dearly departed defenders. Oof, nice one. Do they give Emmys to casting directors? If so, whoever filled that position for the Sandman is a shoo-in. Kirby Howell Baptiste as Death was an inspired choice, stealing every scene she's in, just as she did in the graphic novel. And it's so great to see Hobb, like an old fictional friend, brought to slightly less fictional life. Heartwarming from start to finish. Also, loving Desire's very accurately depicted domicile. Perfect. 5 forever friendships out of 5. Peace and take care. Coffee and vodka. Yes. Yeah. I think I pretty much said the exact same thing. Yeah, Kirby knocks it out. I'm interested to see what else she does in the future. Yeah. I think she's it was the first I have heard of this actor. And I'm interested to now I've seen the chops. I'm kind of like, okay, Like, I'd like to see you take on other things. I'm pretty sure she probably has already been snatched up for a number of other things.
I'm certain of it. And definitely, if you get the chance, go watch some of the interviews with her. She is so lovely to watch. She absolutely adored this role. Absolutely loved being on set, even though she had to eat 100 apples or so for that scene where she walks down the street with Morpheus. She's so lovely to listen to. So go and watch some of the interviews with her. Let's head on over to Facebook, John.
Yeah, thank you, Coffee and Vodka. Over on Facebook, Suzanne Nelson says, I miss Kat Dennings, who was great in the Audible version, but Kirby Howard-Baptiste has the perfect mix of tenderness and creepiness. Yes, she certainly was absolutely phenomenal as Death here, was Kirby. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Victor Von Doom also says, greetings, dreamers. I like the character building in this episode. Death's attempt to break Morpheus out of his PTSD funk was very touching. It seems he has one sibling that loves him. Death's tavern challenge regarding hobgaddling led to a very interesting travels through the centuries and historical backdrop. Did Morpheus sponsor Will Shakespeare? Could that be the reason Sir Francis Bacon challenged his works? Desire kind of reminds me of Loki. Looking forward to her next plot. Nighty night, dreamers. Thanks so much, Victor. Certainly she's mischievous for sure, is Desire. But I like the comparisons. I can't wait really to get into her motivations. I really want to understand Desire a bit more. And yes, I think Morpheus did have a quiet word with Will Shakespeare, and yes, certainly maybe that's why. Yeah, there's always been that thing sort of around whether Will Shakespeare wrote everything that is attributed to him, but I guess it's maybe like staff writers or even
ghostwriters,
ghostwriters, or even say that
endless writers.
Sort of graphic novels, until recently, maybe in the movies at least, that they weren't acknowledging, a lot of the creators of those. So maybe that was just how they did it in Elizabethan England, I guess. Little club on the back. But, certainly a really good, character building, I think, for sure. Loved getting that sense of Dream with his sibling Death, and him getting a bit of his sort of the stride back in his step.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Victor. Next up, we also have some feedback from Parthenia Locklear, who had this to say: this may have been my favorite episode. It's possibly because we will all have to meet Death one day. The actress was awesome, the writing was well done, it was fun, loving, endearing, and also made me teary-eyed. I loved it. I definitely want to see this character again. The story and friendship of hobgoblin, this was all really good to me.
Excellent stuff, Parthenia. I think that really sums it up for me. It was just really good, awesome, well done, all that stuff. Great stuff. Thanks, Parthenia.
Yeah.
We also got feedback from Dr. Bob Phillips, who had this to say: such a beautiful episode. The choice to pair the midwifery of Death, an act performed with utter love, and the bonds of friendship across all the highs and lows of an English half-millennium couldn't have been improved. It resets the Sandman as purposed. It tickles us with an extra layer of Constantine and drives us to wonder wildly about the nature of desire.
Don't we all do that all the time, Dr. Bob?
Yes, worry about the nature. I'm always worried about desire, or wondering about desire.
Thanks so much, Dr. Bob. It seems this one really does seem to go down well with everybody, as it did in the comics.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bob, and thank you for phonetically providing Constantine for us as well.
Very good. Very good.
Yes.
I also like the midwifery of Death. I think that's a really good phrase as well, Dr. Bob.
Sort of phrase, yeah.
Ben Rush says, simply perfect. I hope there is a plan to adapt the 2 Death miniseries into the series. Also lovely to see hobgoblin as well. Good stuff.
Excellent stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Joe Herbers says, this was so much more enjoyable than episode 5. Very well done. Yes, I guess chalk and cheese may spring to mind between episodes 5 and 6.
Yes, both well done, but definitely this one more enjoyable than episode
exactly.
5. Absolutely.
Michael Booth says, a good pause and palate cleanser after last episode before we get into what I assume will be an arc about destiny and desire in the final episodes. Death was brilliant, warm, compassionate, and wise, but absolutely resolute in her duties. I wish we hadn't had all the advertising though. It would have been nice to be surprised by her identity. The problems with a all-at-once release style, I suppose. Hobbs' story was a good walk through humanity, and it was a pleasure to see Jenna Coleman back again, with a different accent. Remembering her Doctor Who days, she does love a good accent switch. I want to see an episode about the other adventures with 1700s Constantine. Overall, a fantastic episode with us seeing Dream learning to connect with humanity and his purpose.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Great stuff. Thanks, Michael.
We also got a bit of feedback in from Kevin Smith, one of our wonderful Patreons over on patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries. Kevin, thank you so much for sending in your voicemail in to us. I understand you had a bit of a problem getting it through to us. Always, if you want to send in feedback to us, you could always record it and email it to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com. But thanks for marking it with these 2 episodes, with episode 5 and episode 6 as feedback. Here's what Kevin had to say about episode 5 and episode 6.
Hi guys, I'm not a comic book reader, so I was a bit hesitant about getting into the Sandman. A couple of introductory podcasts alerted me to its long history and fandom, and most reviewers have that background as their basis, so it's a little bit intimidating, I guess. But being new to this universe myself, I'm glad my first look at it comes through this medium of TV. It makes the show really fresh for me, rather than comparing it with the original, as we can't help but doing when we're familiar with the source material. For me, though, this show is the most engaging TV since The Watchmen. My sense is that Neil Gaiman's work is hard to adapt to TV, but I think TV has become increasingly adept at being able to do it. His imagination is hard to change to a visual form, but, I think American Gods got better at doing it, and then this show is doing a really good job of it. I really like in episode 6 how Death was portrayed as the nicest member of the family. That was a really fresh take. And I was also pleased by the positivity of Hob Gadlin's story, which seemed like it would end in disaster, but actually didn't. Just one of his years kind of was disastrous. Not that I'm always looking for that positivity, and the darkness of the episode at the restaurant was also engaging. Just all of the ideas are so fresh and thoughtful. So I really love the show, but I equally look forward to your podcast as much as each episode itself. John seems to share the fresh perspective that I have, while Derek and Chris bring a detailed knowledge of the comic. So you guys have struck a really good balance, and I appreciate your work. Thanks. Bye-bye.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your thoughts about these 2 episodes and about the podcast as well. It's really good to get your support, and glad you're enjoying the take that we have on this. It's very rare that all 3 of us have kind of different perspectives on the show that we're covering. I think something like Wheel of Time, where I hadn't read the book and Chris is a massive fan and John just started. I think that's the only other one that we have where all of us were kind of in different places watching the show in that way. So really good to hear that it's working well for you. I know it's a big surprise for me when something as iconic as the Death character in the show, the reveal of it comes across as well as it did in the comic to someone like John, who hadn't read the comic books before and didn't know that this character was Death, which is it worked out really well. So that was really cool. Overall, though, you're right. There's a challenge with Neil Gaiman and the adaptations of his work, partly because his work is written for the medium in which he's writing. So when he writes comics, it's a great example of what comics can actually do with their narrative structure and with the ability to have an artist draw a different character on every single page, or even a different version of someone like Morpheus on every single page. Whereas TV, there's a huge amount of budget involved in bringing that to the screen, which I think is evident from this Warner Brothers version of it from the Netflix show, that they are pouring money into it for even very small scenes. So I'm really happy with how the show has turned out so far. Let's hope we can get a season 2 out of it to tell some even more of those stories. But really great to hear from you. Thank you so much, Kevin, for your thoughts. Hopefully we can get some more thoughts from you before the end of the season as well. Lara Willie-Strink says, wow, I knew I would love this episode because The Sound of Her Wings is my all-time favourite issue of the entire Sandman series, but I was not expecting how much it would affect me. First off, I'm so glad I read this ages ago as a month-to-month comic before promotional posters, the internet, or even the knowledge of other Sandman fans, because when reading the comic I thought, who is this cute but sassy little goth girl talking to Dream like he's just some schmo in the street? We didn't know that Dream had a family, like we were told outright in episode 1 of this series, and even when she said she was his sister, we didn't really know what that meant. When it was revealed that this is Death, my mind was blown. My recall is blurry, but I might have let an audible squeal. However, even having read this issue many times over and knowing what was about to take place, I still bawled like a baby, especially with the scene of the Jewish violinist as Death revealed herself to him. I believe it's because Kirby Hell Baptiste absolutely embodied the spirit of this character, warm, loving and kind, but with enough saltiness to school her little brother with a bit of tough love, and enough wisdom to pull him out of his dour self-pity. Combining this issue with Men of Good Fortune, a later comic entry, was just perfect, and I was thrilled to get Hobgoblin into the series so soon, and so perfectly portrayed, exactly as I imagined him to be. My favourite episode so far. It may even trump the source material. 5 enthusiastic street cart apples out of 5. Love it, Lara. I'm so glad you enjoyed this one. This is a very special episode. I'm so glad for me as well. It was done so well. Exactly what I was hoping for.
Yeah, great stuff, Lara. Yep, I think it just seems as though this hit everyone's sort of points, I guess, you know, in different ways for different reasons. But certainly, you know, whether comic book or non-comic book reader, but even like yourself, I didn't realize that was Death. Like I'd managed to keep myself away from the promotional stuff.
Yes.
And it was, who is this person speaking with Dream? You know, trying to pep him up. You know, I guess just a good Samaritan ultimately, you know.
I'm so glad and shocked. You obviously don't listen to me at all, John.
No comment.
Good stuff. Thanks so much, everybody, for your feedback. Really good to hear from you again. Please keep sending them in. Keep emailing us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries.com with your thoughts about the rest of the series. 5 more episodes to go. Really looking forward to the continuation of this. We will be back next time with our discussion of Sandman Chapter 7, The Doll's House.
Yes, thank you so much. We hope you stay subscribed to the podcast, and if you enjoy what you hear, why not share it with your friends? Because sharing the podcast is what, boys?
Sharing
the love.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah. You can also support us by heading on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries, where for an ongoing monthly amount, just to keep the old dreams and deaths going and the hamsters in the wheels and death, because death does come and take the hamsters. They only last so long.
Oh, gee,
so
that's dark.
we have to keep we're kind of replacing those hamsters. So they do cost a fee. So please help us support the engines of our podcast servers by heading on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries and supporting us for any monthly amount. Or if you just want to give a one-off donation, why not head on over to buymeacoffee.com/tvpi. Don't got any dollars to support our hamsters? No worries. Again, please just send us your feedback, get involved, share the podcast, leave us a review, rate us, do all those fun things, and that is very much appreciated as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us. Guys, see you in 100 years.
Yes.
Indeed.
Yeah, we'll probably still be podcasting.
Probably.
Bye, fellow dreamers.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks so much, fellow dreamers, for joining us. It's great chit-chatting about the Sandman with you. We'll see you again next time. But in the meantime, remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep dreaming. And nighty-night.